when we study Vedic astrology, it's kind of like studying strands of DNA. Obviously people are very unique. They have very specific karma. And, you don't see it in the main chart, in the Rashi chart. But when you go deep in the chart, you find, you see that, that you see the strands of the DNA. So my goal also always in teaching astrology is like, how can we get deeper? How can we be more specific? I usually give you extra videotapes to watch, and then we'll spend 3 weeks on Navamsha, and 2 weeks on Drekana. Navamsha, everybody always tells us how important it is, but then they often don't tell us why. And so, we easily can spend 3 weeks on it. And in Jaimini astrology, it really can, I'll show you some of that today. You can really get into the depth of a person's purpose on the planet, when you rotate the Navamsha chart. It's very possible. Drekana, is very important. It's a third of the, it's dividing the chart into 3, and even the Westerners talk about the Decode. And it has a lot to do, there's a lot of things that it brings up about health, and it's more than just brothers and siblings. It's, there's a lot more there. There's, it's Varga, the 3rd house. We will spend a whole day on career, in the D10 chart, and we could easily spend 2 days on that. I'm going to be doing a couple classes on the D60 chart. And the D60 chart is the chart that changes every 2 minutes. It's it's used to kind of rectify twins, but Parashara tells us it's one of the most important charts, and no one ever uses it because you have to have the chart perfectly rectified. So the first thing that when we look at the Navamsha chart is that we want to look at planets in the 1st, 5th, and 9th houses in the Navamsha chart, because the planets in the 1st house tell us what talents we were born with. So Jupiter in the 1st house in the D9 will make you a natural teacher or counselor. You were just born with that gift. I've got Mars in the 1st house in my D9 in Virgo. So it makes me it shows that I've had military strategy lifetimes. And, I've used that energy to be kind of practical and strategized, in business for people. And that energy, it also shows that, I have a lot of warrior lives, and you can see that also because I have Mars and Aries in the 6th. So, so the planet in the D9, in the 1st house in the D9 is very important because it shows you the natural talents that you've inherited. The 5th house in the D9, you always look at the trines in the D9 first. So it shows you the talents that we grow into later in life. Maybe they come up in our college years. So let's say you have Venus in the 5th house in the D9. So maybe by your college years, you're kind of really picking up, bringing out your musical talents or your artistic painting talents or something connected to Venus. And then the planets in the 9th house in the D9 represent the talents for which we need a teacher or guru to guide us. So I have Jupiter in the 9th house in Taurus in my D9. And Taurus, when I really kind of realized this was very deep, because Jupiter in Taurus is, doesn't have dignity. Taurus is a very material sign, so it means I more of a material guru. And at some point in my life, in my 30s, I met a man who taught me a lot about the financial markets, and he was my Jupiter in the 9th house in Taurus, and he brought out all these qualities that created my career, being a financial counselor and being an investor. But it was something that I needed to learn. I needed a guru. So whatever planet you have in the 9th house in the D9 represents the talents that you need to bring out. So the rising sign of the D9 will reveal our hidden personality. So if you have Scorpio rising so I'm Scorpio rising, but I'm Virgo rising in the Navamsha chart. And the more I get to know myself, the more I realize I'm so much more Virgo rising. Everything in my life is writing and communication and teaching and service and healing. the more I kind of understand the rising sign of my Navamsha chart, which is connected to Virgo, which is about service and healing, um, I'm too much of a perfectionist, the more I kind of understand my hidden personality, the first house, rising sign of the first house. So I think we get too caught up in our Rashi chart rising sign, and it may tell us a lot about our physical body and our appearance, but our inner personality may be more seen in the first house in the Navamsha chart. And I am a perfectionist. I'm a strategic businessman. I'm very analytical. Those are not things that you would describe to Scorpio. I do have Scorpio qualities in me, but they're not. They're more pronounced when you look at the Virgo rising in the Navamsha chart. There's a whole way of reading this chart. This is a rotation of the Navamsha chart, but it makes the rising sign where the Atmakaraka is placed. So this is a very important chart, and we'll study a little bit of this in our third Navamsha class, because it's basically rotating the Navamsha chart around the soul planet, and it's a very important chart. It's very revealing. Again, what is it? Gemini. Okay, so then there's a chart that takes the Rashi chart and combines it with the Navamsha chart and creates what's called the Kamsha Rashi chart, which is, to me, the most revealing chart about our purpose on the planet. And so what do we get when we combine my Rashi chart and my Kamsha Navamsha chart? We get Gemini again, writer, communicator, teacher, Jupiter K2. Jupiter is it's in Purnavasa Nakshatra. Jupiter is about teaching. K2 is about spiritual knowledge, teaching astrology. So what we get in my life purpose chart is that we get Gemini rising with Mercury in the 9th, again associated with higher wisdom, spirituality, and Jupiter and K2, connected to Jyotish and spiritual. I've been involved in teaching meditation and spiritual knowledge, 40 years, and I recognize that it is my highest purpose. But when I first started studying Jaimini astrology and playing with these charts and rotating them, you suddenly say, "Oh my God, it's right there." If you want to see what karma you've inherited from your grandparents, you look in those charts. And the D60, I said, is very key. Parashara, when you calculate the power of the charts, he gives the D60 the most energy for calculation. And it's very key because it shows past life karma, and it's an accumulation of all our past life karma. I mean, we only take so much past life karma in any one life on, but because you can see what we've chosen in this life, but we can see kind of our past life in the D60 and the kind of general patterns that we've accumulated. So it's quite fascinating. Ancestral karma is very, very important. We're in the holiday season now where we honor our ancestors and go to the temple and we do offerings and stuff like that, because half the times some of the stuff that goes on in our life is not even our stuff. It's like we're working out our ancestors' karma. So this is kind of interesting. So one of the things that we'll learn, one of the major techniques with Varga charts, is that you always want to compare the relationship with the Rashi chart to the Navamsha chart, or the Rashi chart to the Varga chart. And if you get a movement of 6, 8, or 12 signs, or even 3 for that matter, because 3 is not a good number in the Vargas, you're out of sync. And there may be more difficulty in creating and manifesting those issues. So in my case, my rising sign is Scorpio, and my rising Navamsha is Virgo. So there's an 11 relationship, and there are difficult problems with 11s, but for the most part, we like 11s because they bring fulfillment of desires. But if your Rashi sign is, let's say my rising Navamsha were Gemini, so I'm Scorpio rising, and my rising Navamsha, if my rising Navamsha were Gemini, there would be an 8 relationship, which would mean there would be more kind of sudden difficulties or need for transformation or more 8th house issues because there's an 8 relation between my rising sign and my Navamsha chart. So you always want to look, and this principle, which is we'll look at in the course next week, Rashi Tula and Baba Suchika, is how signs are transposed from sign to sign and or from house to house in the different chart. So you're in a Mars period. You've got Mars in the 12th house in the Varga chart. You're going to have problems during the Mars period in that area of your life. One of the things I always tell people is, people say, "Is my period going to be good?" Well, is the answer, look at the Varga charts. If Mars is if you're going into a Mars period and Mars is in good houses in all your Vargas and it has dignity, then all areas of your life are going to work in that Mars period. If the Mars period is promising in other ways, but that's really the case. Life is a mixture. You go into a period, your relationship falls apart, but you get promoted at work. You get, my Mars period, I was sick all the time. I had great income during that time. I had relationship problems. You can see that all in the Varga charts. And if you want to be specific with people, you've got to look at what's going on in the Dasha period and all the Varga charts. I don't like to me, I don't want to ever say something's good or something's bad. It's not good or bad. There's always some deep lesson here. I mean, 8th house stuff is about transformation. Even if we end up sick in the hospital, we're there because we have to look at some area of our life. People who end up with 8th house transformations in the hospital come out and say, I've got to change my life. I've got to get out of this relationship. I've got to get out of this job. Something good comes out of it. I had a lot of 8th house karma in college. I had kidney stones for 9 months, and I was a perfect meditator. I had a good diet, went to bed on time. I was this walking time bomb, and it was a big wake-up call for other areas of my life. And eventually, it transformed my life into learning about being better at health and not listening to the doctors. The doctor said, "You're going to be sick the rest of your life. There's nothing we can do." And I said, bullshit. And I went to the library. I was a PhD student, and I said, I found out I needed to take magnesium, and I transformed my health. But there was a wake-up call at work there about repressed anger, and I eventually understood it, and I eventually had to heal myself and empower myself. So even difficult things can be looked at positively, and we always have to do that in Jyotish. And if we're giving readings, we always have to find a way to explain that to people, because you don't ever want to tell somebody they're going to be sick for the next year. You're going to say you need to take care of your health. You have this tendency, it could come up, but if you have a good diet and good exercise, if you do your meditation, if you chant these mantras, you're probably going to get through it okay. We always want to be positive. So we will meet next week. There's some of you, we have a bunch of people who have signed up already. We will meet next week. We will continue with more rules about Vargas, to get more specific. And if you're not going to be with us, I look forward to seeing you again at some other future panel. So thank you again, all. I'm going to officially end the class here. Have a great day.